Hello, and welcome to this episode of Peace in the Time of a Pandemic, a summer video short series from the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies, part of the Keough School of Global Affairs at the University of Notre Dame. I'm Tarsha, a current Kroc Institute doctoral student studying psychology and peace studies, and I'm joined today with Dr. Darcia Narvaez, Professor of Psychology and longtime Kroc Institute faculty fellow, to discuss transformative opportunities for families during the current COVID-19 crisis. So, as we all know and are experiencing, the emergence of the global pandemic of the coronavirus has brought numerous unanticipated changes to families, children, and everyday life in the home. These changes bring with them difficulties and hardships, but also new opportunities that can foster child health, development, and overall human flourishing for all family members. In this discussion today, we will focus on how the changes to family life brought about by the global pandemic can provide opportunities for transformation and growth in the family. We will discuss these opportunities in light of the evolved nest, the ecological system of care that optimizes child development. Thank you again, Darcia, for being here with us. So to begin, let's first discuss the evolved nest. So what is the evolved nest?
Well, the evolved nest we study in our lab. You and I do that with our data collection, longitudinal studies, and other kinds of studies. And we look at the early life experience, which we call the evolved nest. But just to point out that the nest really involves a whole life of a person. And when you provide these nested characteristics, everybody flourishes. So it's a whole family kind of approach, not just for kids, but we are focusing in on more on the children and what families can do together.
Yeah, so, it's not a list of what parents need to do, more pressure, right? It's an ecological system.
That's right, and it's really a community provision, usually in our ancestral context. So in the last 10,000 years, we call that the last 1% of human genus history. And before that, before civilization, you know, people lived on the earth for millions of years, and this is the nest they provided. It's tens of millions of years old, most of it, through our evolutionary process of becoming human. And it's then evolved to a fixation point where it's just has been provided for all that time, meaning that it optimizes development, keeps people thriving.
Yes.
So what is it?
Yeah, and before we talk specifically about what it is, can you talk about what that means to optimize
yes.
development, right?
Good question.
That might be a new term for some of our audience members.
We often hear about resilience and how important that is for children. And the way I've looked at the literature on resilience is, you know, look at all these bad things that happen to a child, you know, and puts them below the zero, kind of a baseline of zero. And so toxic stress, not good. So how do we get them back to functioning adequately, right? Graduating from high school and so on. Well, that's to me resilience. When we talk about optimization, we're talking about the potential of that unique child, their unique gifts. They're flourishing, all systems optimized to function very intelligently. That's like 0 to 100 is the difference, right? So resilience is down here, optimization's up there. We haven't really embraced that in our socio-political system yet, but that's one thing our lab is trying to change.
Yeah, so when we talk about flourishing, it's not just your report card from school, but it's about, you know, academic, not about just academic performance, but it's about the entire person, socio-emotional development, interpersonal development, thriving in its fullest capacities.
Yeah, physical health as well as neurobiological.
And neurobiological.
At the optimal level. So your stress response works flexibly, all your systems work flexibly and tune into the particular situation. and maybe get out of balance momentarily, but get back to homeostasis, a balanced self. You're able to keep balance more easily when you're in an optimal condition.
So we'll talk about exactly what the evolved nest is in a second here, but just to reiterate that the provision of the evolved nest promotes human flourishing for all members of the family and simultaneously builds capacities that allow individuals to overcome future stress or adversity in positive ways, right? So specifically when we're talking about changes and stress as a result of the pandemic, the evolved nest is promoting human flourishing and also those capacities to overcome those stresses, right? So what is the evolved nest?
One more thing before I say.
Yes.
And that is,
it's such a rich topic.
it is. One more thing, we are having this conversation on behalf of the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies, and the nest actually promotes peaceableness. So we've got data on that, how providing these things that meet your basic needs as a human being help you then to be calmer with other people, more skilled with other people, less reactive and stressed out, because you've got this all built up, this very deep resilience, real resilience that helps you get along well and cooperate.
Mm-hmm. And are able to practice that flexibility and perspective taking, even in challenging situations, which is so fundamental to peace building.
That's right. Okay, to the nest.
To the nest. Yes, what is the evolved nest?
Evolved nest, a set of practices. Every animal has a set of practices to optimize the development of their young, and that's we're focusing in on the young aspects of the nest. So it's evolved to really help that youngster flourish in those early years and throughout childhood, and then to be a contributing member of the community. So it's a set of practices that are shaping the neurobiology of the child, but also their psychology, their sociology, their whole self in every dimension you can imagine, morality as well, which is really the focus of our lab. Mm-hmm. All these things are shaped by these practices. And they include, I'll just run through it quickly and then we'll zero in on a few of them. So soothing perinatal experience, birth experiences. So you're not stressing the baby with separation of mom and baby or other stressors. On request breastfeeding for several years. Positive moving touch, so lots of rocking and carrying of the child, and no negative touch, no punishment. All these things we know, if you don't get them, your trajectory for wellness decreases. It goes, it's a risk factor, everything that's missing here. Positive climate of acceptance, of you feel like you belong as a child, you feel like you're welcomed. Self-directed social play, you play with multiple aged playmates in the natural world. Creative play without, toys so much as social interaction. Allo mothers or allo parents, so this is a community of caregivers that provide responsive care. So mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, aunt, uncle, and non-kin are responsive to the needs of that child. So they're keeping babies calm in those first 18 months because we're born 18 months early compared to other animals. We look like fetuses till 18 months of age. Wow, really? Yeah, because the bones aren't fusing in the skull and various other things. And so babies need an external womb experience for at least those 18 months, and then sensitive care in those first years when the neurobiology, all the systems are deciding how they're going to function for life, what your personality is going to be like. And so these things are really critical for optimizing development. And then the last two are nature connection. So just delving into more of how important it is that we are human beings on the earth, and part of how our ancestors evolved and thrived was connecting to nature and collaborating with, partnering with nature instead of moving against it, as our society tends to do these days. And the last one is healing practices, to have routine healing practices where, we all make mistakes. Humans can make choices, and sometimes we make bad choices and we hurt somebody or we feel hurt. And healing practices, routine practices where you forgive, you mend, and all sorts of ways you can do that are also part of the nest.
Yes. And, what I think is important about all of these is that, our lab focuses on investigating the neurobiological mechanisms of how the nest is shaping individuals through the specific neurobiology. But then within the scientific literature, each one of the components you just listed has a wealth of evidence, right, supporting how these experiences are shaping our neurobiology, and this undergirds behavior and prosociality and flourishing and peaceableness, right?
That's right.
So this is why it's very important. I'm thinking that, the understanding that experience is shaping our neurobiology, that's such a critical concept, especially now during the pandemic. So let's focus in on a few of the components of the nest. For the time here during the pandemic and with families, of how we can be promoting the nest during this time, and in that way helping all members of the family thrive really during this time. So.
Yes. One other thing is babies, what babies experience is how they become. So if you treat them with empathy, they develop empathy. If you treat them with responsive care, they become responsive to you and to the others. So you're actually building their capacities moment by moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important to realize that they're not machines. They are shaped dynamic systems. And just like with weather, a dynamic system, the early experiences shape the trajectory to come. And so it's really critical to provide that very loving nest, attentive nest. You can't spoil a baby. That's a myth. They do expect to have their needs met, just like in the womb in those first 18 months. They expect to have things, right away, because otherwise their system gets out of whack so easily. They're still learning how to be a person,
Mm-hmm.
and they need help. They need adult help, and allo parents help to regulate heart and digestion and breathing and all sorts of things in order to develop well. So if you leave them alone to cry, or you leave them alone in a carrier or crib all day long, they're not going to develop as well. There'll be gaps in their development because they need you to unfold. They need the adults to help them blossom. And if you don't give them that nested support, they kind of never really open all the way up, right? They never really find their true self, develop their true self, unless they have lots of therapy later on. But we'd rather not do that. That's expensive and a waste of energy.
Hard, yeah.
Which one do you want to start with?
Yeah, and I guess before even we go there, it's such a rich topic, but just reiterating, why when we look at what's happening within the child within the first few years of life, it's an incredible amount of neuronal development, right? And as you mentioned at the beginning, an infant that's born, what happens just within the first year of life, the brain volume doubles. Right, so not only the size, but also the neural architecture is forming. And so with that, you have this incredible malleability and susceptibility to experience. The brain is experience dependent, right? So how it experiences and what it experiences is how it develops. And this is so true for infants and for children. That's why it's so important to be providing the nest in these early years. And change is possible, but we know that, and we're finding that there are some things that are set on a trajectory that's lifelong, right? That there are experiences in those first years that make it difficult to overcome later. So all the more reason to be providing it in the first few years. So with that, let's talk about some of the specific components of the nest. Let's talk about responsivity. So this one, especially in developmental psychology, there's a lot of research, many decades, on the importance of responsivity for infants and children. So what is it and how do we do it? I guess.
I like the term that Grazina Kohanska uses, and that is a mutually responsive orientation.
Hmm.
So for a baby, that means the baby goes, oh, well, then you go, oh, back, right? Or they look at you and then you look at them back, and then you make up games and little tricks to to play together. When the child's a little older, it's the child will be looking at the parent for reassurance at various times, and then the parent should be there to give reassurance. Now, it varies by culture what that means. And so it's the kind of a being with way of companionship care, we call it also. You're right there when needed, but you're not intrusive and helicoptering the child as they grow older. In a way, babies need helicoptering. They need to be on you. They need to be, rocked and kept calm. That maybe just helicopter has a bad connotation. So the companionship, I think, is the way to think about it. And as a child grows up, they need less of that immediate physical touch all the time, and they need to move out and explore. But you need to be there when they come back and they need a hug or something. So being responsive is to acknowledge their emotions and not shame them, not punish them, because usually what a child is expressing when they misbehave, which is all in the adult's eyes, is they need something. They have a need that's not getting met. And so what the parent should do then is move in and find out what that need is and meet the need. And then the child will be fine. But children are born to be cooperative, to learn cooperation. And they learn cooperation from parents who are cooperative with them.
Mm-hmm.
We only have a couple minutes left, I think.
I know. So it's meeting the need of the infant or child in the moment, right? That's responsivity. So yeah, we only have a few more minutes. So I guess quickly we'll go through the other few.
So touch is important. For babies especially, it builds the vagus nerve and other aspects of the body well. The oxytocin system needs touch, needs caring and all. And even with age, even teenagers need touch. And maybe that's just sitting next to each other on the sofa, shoulder to shoulder. Or once in a while, a hand on the shoulder or something, whatever works for that child. Maybe it's just a high five, it depends on the child's experience with touch previously, because the body is shaped normally to love touch. And if they haven't had a lot early on, maybe their body didn't develop the systems for that. Another one is play. Free play, we mentioned that. It's social, self-directed play, to not be supervised and organized by adults, but to be out there climbing the tree, and adults don't look. Let the child take risks. That's what they need to do, and they need to do it without you worrying so much about them. And there are playgrounds in Britain now that are risk playgrounds with all sorts of dangerous things in them on purpose, because they think that children need those experiences. Mm-hmm. You want to pick one up?
Sure. And, I think we've talked about throughout the conversation, hitting on all of these are important for a positive home climate. And that's particularly important right now during the pandemic. This is something that is an opportunity. We have an increased togetherness, right? No more camps during the summer, this type of thing as we're winding in. And so these are an opportunity to be together. And we know that just the maternal presence with children increases oxytocin, which is, the love and bonding hormone. We also see through the neuroimaging studies with EEG that it's stimulating the kids' frontal cortex, just being in the presence of their parents. And stimulating the frontal cortex is good. That's a positive thing for development. It's all your executive function skills. So that's an important component of the nest and something that we can take advantage of during this time.
For babies, positive home climate means having their needs met. And they expect to be slept with, on your body, near you, all times, 24/7. And so it's important to look up how to do that safely. And cosleeping.nd.edu has all sorts of guidelines from James McKenna. And then one last thing we wanted to bring up was nature connection. And this is something you can be doing now during the shelter in place or social distancing, or physical distancing, really, not social. And you can try to connect them with nature in different ways. Go talk to the trees, the insects, the ants, find a butterfly, watch the birds, take a walk in the park. These are the kinds of things that build our sense of restfulness and connectedness. There's quite a bit of converging evidence about that in empirical studies.
Overall general health, yes. Yeah, so in closing, just like to summarize what we've talked about in this conversation, that, you know, the evolved nest is the best environment to help children develop well, but also build the capacities to overcome future stress. And when children receive the care that they need to develop well, they build these capacities to overcome all sorts of stress, like from the coronavirus. And this is a time of a lot of changes, but also opportunities so that families can increase time together. They can increase positive touch, playtime, and also immersion experiences in nature. And all of these experiences support the neurobiological architecture that children need to grow well, to reduce stress in them, but also reduce tension within parents and all the family members. And so that we see that the evolved nest is really what is needed for all family members to flourish well.
For more information about the nest, go to evolvednest.org.
Yes, you can find a lot more resources there. So thank you so much, Tarsha, for being here today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mary. Good talking with you. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.